Welcome back to the Grit for Life Living Wild and Running Free workshop. We're in week 3, and this is going to be day 4 of the workshop for week 3. Last video that if you're watching this on YouTube, you do not have access to because we did it as a live recording on the actual workshop page. We talked about that in living in the wild, there are 3 necessities that you must have in order to be able to survive. And we used the metaphor for one of these and began to compare it to living our lives. And those 3 elements are: you have to have shelter. You have to have shelter to protect you from the elements. You have to have shelter to provide a place to come back to, a base camp, a place to ground yourself. The other 2 elements are food and fire. And today we're going to take a look metaphorically at food. When we think of food from a survival standpoint, we think of something that is not necessarily for pleasure, but truly for sustainability and to be able to keep going. You have to have that calorie intake in order to be able to survive. You have to have that food to provide you the nutrients. The thing about it is, if you're not careful and you don't prepare the food right in the wild, you can get the wrong food, or you can get food that is tainted or spoiled, and then you can get sick. Even though you are intending it for the right reasons, you end up taking in the wrong food, and it makes you sick, and it can give you dysentery. It can give you all kinds of intestinal problems and stomach problems, even to the point of dehydrating you and taking your life. And there's also obviously the fear or the opportunity or the chance that you don't get enough food, or you don't get any food and you starve to death. At the same time, there's getting the improper balance of food. I've been watching the TV reality competition Alone. It is found on Netflix and Amazon Prime, and the premise is that they take 10 people and they put them out into the wild, into the wilderness, and they have to be the last person to survive. There's no timetable to it. It's just be the last person to not give up, the last person to be able to survive, and they have to survive out in the wild. And I guess one thing I never thought about watching this is how you have to keep that balance. You can't just have a very high protein diet without the balance of fat, because fat helps your body be able to absorb and handle the nutrients that your body needs in order to survive. And if you have a high protein diet without adding the fat, you're not going to have that. And what it made me realize is that that's very similar to life. That when we are trying to learn to live wild and run free, as this workshop is called, again, we can choose to intake food metaphorically into our mind, our body. We can process the proper things, but if we have it off balance, it's just as dangerous and bad as if we weren't eating at all. And it can make us sick also. It can make us lose body weight in the wild when we do not eat properly. And that can lead to all kinds of different health issues. It can lead to heart disease and heart problems. It can lead, again, as I stated with the dysentery, it can lead to intestinal problems and a breakdown. Your body can begin to attack itself and begin to eat itself in order to try to survive. How do we wrap that around metaphorically into what we are speaking about? How do we use that as a metaphor for our lives? I talk to people a lot of times through Grit for Life, and they have the proper desire and the right intent to live out their dreams, to passionately live their lives, but they just can't seem to find the right balance. They find that their heart and their spirit and their soul is starving. It's starving for love. It's starving for validation. It's starving for the knowledge that everything's going to be okay. And yet when you talk to them, I will tell you, on the surface, I would say, on the surface speaking to them, they're doing the right thing. They have the passion and the fire. They have the desire to do it. They're out trying to do it. But we can have the best intent and not have the right balance. We can have the best intent and not be processing the right attitude, the right mentality, or the right direction. Just like living out in the wild and you eat the wrong food. You have the right intent, you're hungry. You want to feed yourself. And you know that food is important. But you're eating spoiled food. So many times there are individuals who I talk to who they're in relationships that they're giving everything they have, or they're at a job and they're giving everything they have, but unfortunately it's like spoiled food. They have the right intent, they mean well, but they're spending their time feasting on a job, a career, a relationship, or a dream that really was never meant to be theirs. Maybe it was given to them by a parent, or maybe it was given to them by social expectations. And they come to me and they say, Nate, you've heard me say this before, most likely in Grit for Life. The whole thing, I'm living the dream. And I hate that phrase. I don't like that phrase. But people say, I'm living the dream. And I say, well, what is your dream? And they're like, well, maybe they wanted to own their own business and they've tried to start their business, but it's falling apart and they're just getting so beat up and they just keep at it and keep at it and keep at it and keep at it, but they're doing it in the wrong way. They have the right intentions. So how do we avoid that part of it? How do we avoid relationships and careers and pitfalls where we have the right intent, but it's like we're eating spoiled food? Doesn't matter how much of the right intent we have. We're not in the right place. We're not devouring the right food. So we're not sustaining our willpower. We're not sustaining our health. We're not sustaining our mind, body, and soul. I think a few things that we can do is go back to that ethos principle life that we mentioned earlier. You take a look and you say, okay, something's not right here. Again, going back to the TV show Alone, I know there's a couple of contestants, and I know several people in Grit for Life are watching it, so I'm not going to spoil it. So I'm going to be very vague here, but get my point across. There are contestants who do get sick, and they said, I know something's not right. And so they stop what they're doing. Do we have that fortitude to do that? Or does society tell us as men and women that we have to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing? And I know in motivation we constantly say, you got to grind it. You got to grind it. You do have to grind. And you do have to put the work in. But if you're putting it in the wrong direction, you might as well not be doing it all. So if things aren't working correctly and things aren't going as you're hoping, and if things aren't planning in the aspect, like you're going, something's not right. I'm feeling kind of sick. I'm not feeling healthy. There's something wrong here. Then what you need to do is you need to learn to be able to self-reflect. Again, we've talked about that in this workshop. You see how all this is starting to tie together. The ethos living life, the self-reflecting, the learning to step back and stop for a minute. And you need to say, hey, am I pursuing the right thing? And in our metaphor, the pursuing the right thing would be that you need food and you need to eat. So that's the right thing. Like that's just common sense. So am I pursuing the right thing? Yes, this is my dream. This is my goal. This is me trying to be the best version of me that I can. But something's not right. So what do I need to stop? What do I need to fix? And that's where you start self-reflecting. You need to step back and you need to reflect and you say, okay, this is where I want to go. This is where I'm at. How can I adjust my perspective and get healthier food? How can I sit there and maybe take a breath for a minute and see what is toxic in my life? Is it a significant other? Is it the career that you're choosing? And you're like, you know what? But it's a business. I want to own my own business. Going back to that thought pattern. I want to own my own business, so I'm learning business from this guy. Yeah, but is this where you're supposed to be, or is the universe trying to tell you that, hey, there's another spot? I learned a long time ago in my career path. My career path is very colorful. I have done a lot of things in my life, and I have loved every single one of them. They've had its ups, they've had its downs. That's life. But what I learned years ago that I think has really helped advance me as an individual, as a man, husband, a father, is to be aware of what is going on in my mind, my body, and my soul. and be aware and be self-reflective, because as I do that, then I can catch. The universe isn't going to just open the sky and this big spotlight's going to come down. You're going to hear this voice of an almighty God or a deity or whatever saying, hey, you, Nate, you need to stop. No. The universe puts little tick marks. It checks to see if you're ready. Checks to see if you're paying attention. Checks to see if you are still wanting to eat that spoiled food, or if you're ready to step back, self-reflect, so that the good food can be put in front of you. If you're just sitting, just mowing down on appetizers and your head is down and you're not paying attention, you're not aware of what's going on, you don't realize the steak's been delivered to the table. And all of a sudden you fill yourself up with bread and rolls and appetizers, and you look over and you go, oh, man, I was hungry and look at that steak, but now I don't want it. And the universe goes, okay, I'll take it from you. And then we get so upset and angry because we feel like nothing ever works out for us. Well, it was working out. It's just the waiter didn't let you know the steaks arrived. They just set them down. And you were so engrossed in the appetizers or the bad food that you really didn't want that you didn't catch the whiff of the steak. I know individuals whose, in their lives, doors have started closing. Maybe it's relationships. I know a lot of people who have a hard time with relationships and noticing and observing the warning signs that a relationship is coming to an end. And they will exhaust themselves to the point of sickness trying to make this relationship work that wasn't really meant for them. It was meant for maybe for a time, but it wasn't meant for all time. Now, I'm not saying if you're married, please understand, I'm not saying that you need to get a divorce. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm using this as a learning tool. So put this application into whatever it fits in your life. I'm just using marriage right now or relationships as a way to drive the point home. So if you're sitting here and you're going, maybe yeah, but maybe you are in a toxic marriage. Maybe you're in an abusive marriage and you keep trying and you're trying and you're just making yourself sick. You keep eating the spoiled food. And no matter how much salt and how much spice and how much you try to mix up that, spoiled food is spoiled food. But so many times I know people who are in like a dating relationship or a serious relationship that they don't realize they're eating spoiled food. It wasn't spoiled when they got it, but by the time you are at where you are in your life now, it is spoiled. And you're still trying to eat it. Well, all the while, the universe is trying to tell you the time's up. Back up. Stop. Think about it. Ask yourself, is there something spoiled here? Is there something wrong? Is there something wrong me? Is it just I don't like the flavor of this, but I need to eat it because it's food? And again, out in the wild, we're not thinking what I want. It's what I need. And that begins to really tone in and bring in and tie in the let's try this again. It weaves in those fibers of that big blanket we talked about earlier. So, we were looking at all this the first couple of weeks like a big blanket, and now we're slowly looking down into the fibers. Maybe it's that you're not even looking for food. You think you are, but you're not really. You have a plan that it's not really working out, but you're not willing to change it. You're trying to fish, but you don't have fishing line and a fishing hook. But all the while, you have a bow and arrows back at the camp. And so you're using the wrong techniques. You are continuing habits that were given to you by maybe your parents or your grandparents. You're continuing habits that maybe was given to you by society that aren't working, my friend. And they still aren't working. And yet you're getting angry because you are so hungry and you're starving. That anger and that starvation is an emotion that begins to overtake you. We've already talked about building stuff on emotion. And it overtakes you, and guess what? You usually will end up now going to the spoiled food. How many people do you know that jump from relationship to relationship, or career to career, or bad choice to bad choice? It's because they haven't taken the time to build that ethos principle life. They haven't taken that time to step back and self-reflect. Instead, they're trying to fish and they don't have fishing line and a hook, and they're getting mad because they're starving in their mind, body, and soul. And so they step back and go back to camp. And instead of taking a moment and thinking, I've got a bow and I've got arrows, I could go hunt. No. Instead, they just know they're starving and they get angry and emotionally, and they go over to a pile of raw meat that is festering in the sun, and they just start eating it. And then they get mad, they get sick, and then they get over the sickness and they go, well, fine, I'm just going to go try fishing again. Sounds stupid, doesn't it? It sounds insane. But we are doing this every day. We do this so often in our lives. Maybe a job that you have been working at for a while, and you've got a lot invested in this job, but it is not working for you. You're not happy. But you're not doing anything. You're not going and learning a new trade, or you're not taking a higher form of education, or you're not reading books to learn. You're not networking with people to find the openings that the universe has set for you. The whole while you're over here trying to fish with no hook and no line, there's a moose that's standing behind your tent that you could shoot easily, but you're not paying attention because you're not aware, because you're so starving and you're so driven by that starvation that you don't take a step back from the emotion and build it on principle. Then there comes to that point where you get the good food. Oh my God. Yeah, you killed that moose. You have got food for ages. The thing about a moose is very high protein but low fat. Again, I'd like to say I know this because I'm smart, but I learned this from that show I was telling you about. You can't just survive on a moose. I would have thought you could, but you can't. It doesn't have a lot of fat. You have to be able to mix it up. You have to you have to finally figure out how to get the fish or find some form of fatty food in order to balance it. Anytime that our life is off balance, we will not survive in the wild. And that off balance can look so many different ways. It can look at that husband or that wife who is so driven with the right intent. Again, remember that. But is so driven to provide for their family that they become workaholics. Because they're chasing that paycheck, and they're chasing that raise, and they're chasing that status. One, to fill a void in their soul. Two, with the right intent, hopefully, to make more money for their family. But what they don't realize is wife and kids back home are crying and hurting because they need you. Husband and kids back home, they're lonely. You haven't balanced it. You're just eating all the protein with the right intent. But your body can't process it. Your life, your mind, your body, and soul can't process it. Your relationships can't process it properly because you're not balancing it out with the proper fat. We have to be able to, again, self-reflect and say, man, I'm not feeling it. Like, is my diet healthy? That's why we talk about in Grit for Life, that mind, body, and soul is that balance. You have to have a balance with all three of them. Life is about balance. And learning to survive in the wild, and learning in a wild life, and learning to be able to work through your relationship and your life and your dreams and your goals and your passion, it has to be balanced. There will be times that one will be a little higher than the other. It may be that you are financially at a point where you are dying, and you and your significant other, or if it's just you realize, hey, okay, I have to work a lot of extra hours. I've been there. I have recently, over the last couple of years, I've had a couple of times where I was working 18, 19 hours a day and then just getting right back up and going back and working 16, 18 hours a day. But I learned the importance of, again, my ethos, family first. Those extra hours that I wasn't working, I had to take a look and go, okay, I'm going to cut back on my sleep because I need time with my family. But then I came into an agreement with my family that my first day off, I'm going to sleep a lot so that my next day off, I can spend with you. It's that balance. I didn't just go with the high protein diet of moose and avoid the fat, or go with a really fatty diet and avoid the protein. I understood that I had to have a balance. Food is a necessity. And in our life, metaphorically, balance, self-awareness, principle-driven life with an ethos is a necessity. It helps us be able to stabilize and become sustainable. You are seeking and desiring what you need and what we are created and what you should have and what you are destined to have if you use the proper tools the right way is a sustainable longevity life. Full of ups and downs, but it eventually balances out. One that has good relationships, one that has a balance with your children, a balance with a career. But in order to do that, you have to be inputting the proper food into your mind, your body, and your soul. This workshop is one of those. Learning where to find your proper motivation is another. Reading good books. You will hear me drive that over and over and over. Learning to find that peace where when you start feeling anxious or you find that you know that shelter that you can return to and take a break for a minute and then step back out into the world. Wow, it's like we planned this. It's like this whole workshop is coming together. You have to remember your response is your responsibility. You are powerful and you are strong. But there will be times you will be hungry and starving. Make sure you choose your food wisely. Don't search outside of the parameters that are safe and meant for you. Don't go ice fishing on thin water or on thin ice. Don't go trying to hunt in thick foliage that you can't see what you're hunting. You need to remember that it is about sustainability. It is about nourishment. Nourishing your mind, your body, your soul for a better, well-rounded, balanced you. Your response is your responsibility.